Hello to my beautiful family of light. Yes, that's you. You may not know it, but I'm here to share that with you and to maybe convince you somewhere along the line that it's true. It's absolutely true. We're related. My name is Claudia, and I want to welcome you to my channel. My channel is all about us finding out the truth that we are way more than we think we are. We're divine beings who are children of our source. And in this particular series of videos that I'm doing, it is all about how I became aware of that consciously and actively began to pursue what that meant and how I could access the information that is out there for us that helps us to come to a really profoundly wonderful life. Now, it isn't always going to be like that, and you probably are aware of that by now. There's plenty of ups and downs. So, this series of videos, this will be number 9. In 7, number 7, I concluded the beginning of a child's life to my 20s, up to my 20s, so through the teens basically, at which time I left home and went out on my own. In the 20s, then, we as humans come to start knowing ourselves a little better. We go out into the world, we explore, we have things to do. Maybe people study, some go into crafts, and some of us don't get that opportunity, but it's okay. Somewhere along the line, life is the best teacher, was the best teacher for me. But through the 20s, that's what I finished in through chapter 7, so you can go back and watch those. I try to keep them all under right around, I'll say 20 minutes. And then in 8, I did a little bit of a recap. So if you get a minute, go back and take a look at that. It'll help you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to start on number 9, which is from my late 20s into the 30s. I'm not sure how far I'm going to get in the amount of time that I've set aside. And I'm happy to talk all day long, but I know you can't sit around and listen for that much time. So there's a limit, and because it's like that, it certainly is consolidated. I've had a pretty, what I'm going to consider an interesting life, and I think that yours has been interesting too. We as beings of the divine, which I will call divine, source, creator, God, I'm going to interchange all of those. But as children of the divine, we are here to experience ourselves on the path to becoming aware that we are divine beings. And so what is it to go from a body, the mental, physical aspect of ourselves, to having our guidance, that inner compass system, help us to make better choices in our lives and for us to learn how to connect with that. So that's what this series is about. It's my journey. I'm sharing with you a bit about my life and how certain things came about, and so that's where we're going to begin. So I left off at around age 27 or 28. I had many pretty powerful experiences off and on in my 20s, and I didn't really understand and didn't question some of it. But as I got a little bit older and had more struggles and more challenges in my life, I think I began to say I need help more often. Probably. And this is a free will planet, so unless you ask, our guidance cannot interfere. And they may nudge you, and I call that your conscience. If you're headed for what I've come to tell my son is a slippery slope, I didn't have that term when I was growing up, I should have, and when I needed it, but it is that guidance is in there like a conscience to say, are you sure you want to do that? you know, you don't, this is not a good idea to spend that. And I mean, money now, that's your grocery money, it's your rent money. You know, you got to have that car oil change done, or that you've got to make that trip, or you need, you know, new shoes, or the kids need something. So it is a system that has been set up that within you have a mechanism that gives you those nudges, and our job is to become aware of that. And as I was growing up, I think I had some kind of an inkling. I never questioned it. I didn't really understand what it was, but as I got older, like I say, I began to wonder. So in my late 20s, I was having trouble, certainly in my marriage, which was, well, I guess you could say it was destined to fail. I kind of had that feeling from the beginning. I am not somebody who is going to expect or anticipate that unless I have a really strong feeling that something isn't right here. And then I act on that. And I knew from the beginning it was not meant to be. This was an individual. I was raised in a very, I had a wonderfully loving dad who was also very stern and strict. My mother was strict. My mother had mental, emotional, and physical problems, and so there was this balance of, you know, one out of whack and the other, you know, pretty happy and more balanced. But I always got along really well with both of them. But I think that is because my circumstances led me to bury my feelings. And I will tell you that in your life, feelings buried alive never die. They're going to eke out in ways that maybe you don't anticipate. And by the time I got into my 20s, stuff started eking out. And so we'll get into that a little bit along the way. And I have always laughed at myself. I find myself funny sometimes that, you know, how could I go ahead and do that when I knew that that was not the right thing to do? Well, because I'm a curious person and I want to know. And I didn't realize at the time that's embedded in me. It was part of my makeup, if you will. You all have characteristics and traits that are yours, uniquely yours. And our walk is designed, this path that whatever path we take, you can veer off the path as many times as you want. Your job as you get older and wiser is to discover that you have this system that is there at your command to guide you along the way so that you don't veer off the path so much. And when we do begin to acknowledge and work with that, we begin to have profoundly wonderful things happen to us. We get that job, or we get that promotion, or the husband or spouse does the right things, and people, materials all come into your life to help you with that. So late into my 20s, I was having a lot of trouble with this marriage. It was not meant to be. He was self-absorbed, and I'm kind of an open, loving person, kind of happy, but I was, the burden of everything seemed to be falling on me, and I was not able to get him to see that help was needed, even if I asked. It just didn't seem to work. Anyhow, so I think I began mid to later 20s. So that's in the 70s and late 70s. And so someone said to me, "You need to go see this psychic." And I thought, a psychic? I don't know about that. I didn't have the money that I wanted to spend, thought I could spend on that. It made me a little nervous. Mom had taken me to see psychics for tea leaf readings and for palm reading and that sort of stuff. So I wasn't unfamiliar with the esoteric arts, but I wasn't necessarily comfortable going by myself. Well, anyhow, I did. After a few weeks of mulling this over and one thing after another happening, it accumulates and piles up. The frustration does. And I went to see this fellow, and I got practically all the way through to what I thought was the end. And he said, "Is there anything else?" And I hadn't brought up my marriage to that point. And I said, "I'm having some trouble with my relationship." And right away he kicked in and led me through a visualization that had me see a door. And I went up to the door, and he asked me if I wanted to open. I said yes, so I opened the door, and he said, "Well, you're standing in the doorway, you're looking in, what do you see?" And so he didn't lead me through anything. He led me to the door. It was my job to do the rest. From there, I could see that my husband, that it was a tiny, tiny space. It was very crowded. The floor, he had, 3 computers or more on his desk. There were stacks and stacks of papers. There were binders and books and things. There was a little tiny window, but it just hardly any light came through. The floor, there was not even a path hardly to the desk. So I was standing in the doorway. I had moved stepped up 2 steps into the door frame, and he asked me, "Well, what do you see?" And I said, or he asked me, "What do you see?" And I said, "Well, it's just so crowded in here." And he said, "How does it feel?" And I said, "There's no room for me here." And he said, "Well, what would you like to do?" And I said, "The only thing I can do," I said, "I want him to come out or acknowledge me or see me, but he ain't going to do that." And he said, "Well, then how about if you turn around and step out away from the door for a minute?" So I did. And he said, "Tell me what you see out there." And I looked and I looked, and I couldn't see a thing. It was just this white. I thought it was snow. And it took him a long time. And he said, "Well, what do you see?" And I said, "All I see is this blanket of white." And he said to me very gently, he said, "That is your canvas." He said, "That is your life. You get to paint your life, and you get to make your own pictures of how you want it to be." And that's the gist of it. I mean, and however long it goes on. But I will never forget that I was 28 or 29 at the time, and I fully understood that I wasn't captive. My thoughts were what were holding me captive. I was raised Catholic. You made your bed, you lie in it. I knew I needed to leave, but I just couldn't. And I also didn't know how. I mean, I had no skills. I just didn't have the wherewithal to think outside of the box that I had been brought up in. So I went home armed with that, and I will tell you, it's another 10 years before I'm able to act on that, other than it did help me to understand that I was the master of my ship. So, armed with that, I felt better, oddly. Didn't change a thing except in my own mind. It was up to me to make my life pretty good, and I also knew that it meant that there were other ways. There had to be other ways. So I began counseling and other things, and it was all right about, it had been a couple of years before that we moved over to the east side of Seattle, and he became, during the course of that time, an apprentice machinist, a journeyman, and then went to work for the largest airplane manufacturer at the time. So we're having this life in which I'm still doing all of the decision making, all of the, I'm maintenance on the vehicles, maintenance on the house, every chore. And, but there was still something within me that hadn't lost itself, that knew, certain things had to be a certain way. In other words, I don't eat somebody else's. The best way to put this is my mom took me to see a psychic when I was 11 or 12. And she said to me, she says, you're very vulnerable and accommodating. But she said, I'm going to tell you, people have a tendency to throw up in your lap. And she said, it isn't your job to clean that up. It's your job to give it back, or step away from it. So I never forgot that, but when you're young like that, I didn't really understand what it meant. As I got older, I began to realize that, it's not my job. I know what's mine to deal with, and that got stronger and stronger as I got a little bit older. So here I am in a marriage that is absolutely, it's loveless, and I'm having to run the show. That's the only way. I mean, I tried several ways, every which way to Sunday, to get him to write a check to pay a bill, and that just wasn't going to work. So I'm progressing in my work, and I'm loving that, but it's a 1.5 to 2 hour commute into Seattle every day, and I've got a latchkey boy at home as he's getting a little bit older. So I think it was just about, but I will say it is during that time that my curiosity in dreams, in words like reincarnation were coming into my vocabulary. There are intergalactic kinds of things that were ways in which you could do stuff with your energy. And I had somebody who was learning how to do, I'm not going to call it, might have been regression work. And so she did some stuff with me. I was learning Tai Chi. And I had taken on ways and things that were satisfying my curiosity and helping to stimulate my other interests as well. And then raising my son was absolutely one of the biggest joys of my life. But I knew, you can only do so much. I'll never forget one time, being a mother was the highlight has been the highlight of my life. I absolutely adored it. And I know one time I had been after him to come home on time. You got to come home when I call you. And I gave him, deadlines, and 45 minutes started out, and I started narrowing, and he just didn't do it. So one day he came home, and it was way late, but at 45 minutes after I'd given him 20 minutes or half hour, I locked the door. I locked all the doors and windows so he couldn't get in. And then I proceeded to wait inside. And sure enough, close to an hour, he came flying down peeking out the window, flying down the road, leapt off his bike, just dropping it and coming up, and he could not get in the house. And I told him, one of these days, because I got to go do some of my chores too, and so if you're not here when I call you or that you're supposed to be home, I'm going to leave without you, and you can go stay at the neighbors or whatever. So he went all around the house trying to unlock windows and doors, and finally he sat down on the front porch and began crying. And I let him sit there for a few minutes, and then I cracked the door. And he stood up, just, tears streaming down his face. And he looked at me and he just, how could you do that? And I said, it doesn't feel very good, does it? And he just stopped. And I said, sweetheart, you don't understand. I'm your mother. When you don't come home when I call, it isn't necessarily that I got to go off to take care of stuff. It may be that I want to know that you're safe. Wherever you are, you've been gone for hours playing. And so I just want you to know it doesn't feel very good, and I expect you to not do it again. And I opened the door. He came in, and I grabbed him up and hugged him, and I said, I love you so much. Please don't do that again. Of course, it never happened again. That's the kind of lesson I gave him. It hits home, it's not comfortable, and every parent, not every parent has the courage to do that, right? I mean, you're facing the possibility of being hated. But the truth of it is, if you love your child, you're going to show them responsibility, that it is their responsibility, not mine. And he was old enough. He was, I don't know, fifth or sixth grade by then anyhow. So that's me. And I'll continue this. We've gone well over time now. I think probably I'm going to have several videos about my 30s. I hope you are going to stay with me. I hope there's something in here for you that rings a bell and lets you know that this inner guidance system, you don't lose yourself. What you're attempting to do is reclaim the parts of you that you might have lost when you were a youngster and began burying or stuffing your feelings. And so that's where we're at. Well, I want to thank you for joining me. I want you to know I love you this much. These arms go all around you in a hug of just pure loving energy. It goes around the earth. I love our Gaia, and I hope that you're a good steward as well as and I attempt to be. I hope that you will like, subscribe, and if you feel inclined, share. I think it's great fun to go delving into your past. There's no judgment here. We are all here. We didn't come in with a manual. Doggone it. We're all here with whatever is inside of us that we're coming to, and it is starting to get a little more active for me when you start coming back to that place that we call home. So in the meantime, know that I love you. What you need to know about me is down below in the description. Anything more you want to know. And until I see you again, I want you to be well, stay safe, be happy, and never forget the truth of who you are as a being of our Creator. And until the next time, thank you for joining me. Take care.